I want me, mine, now.
You know you're responsible for what you hear. You know you're responsible for what you hear.
Greetings and welcome to Thoughts from Maharrey Head, the weekly podcast where I talk about, well, whatever happens to be bouncing around inside my head at the moment, but mostly focusing on constitutional issues and political decentralization. This is episode 114 of Thoughts from Maharrey Head, and I appreciate you tuning in. This week, I'm going to talk about privacy. So one of the policy areas that I've been heavily involved with is surveillance, and been focused on that for a number of years with the 10th Amendment Center. And then about this time last year, I got involved in some local activism here in my hometown of Lexington, Kentucky, after the city installed surveillance cameras in a park that's actually in my neighborhood. And our activism here in Lexington isn't even really focused necessarily on getting rid of surveillance. It's more a matter of ensuring that any surveillance technology that the government is using has some type of oversight and transparency, that it's not being used in secret, that there's written policies governing how this stuff is used. And that's not happening here in Lexington. And to me, this is just common sense. It should be completely non-controversial. But, inevitably when you start talking about surveillance, you get the people that are going to give you the whole, well, if you've got nothing to hide, you got nothing to fear. And I hear this all the time, and it absolutely drives me crazy because, well, in the first place, they don't mean it. And in the second place, if they do mean it, then they're complete morons because it's a stupid mantra. So this has come up recently because my partner in crime, Clay Davis, here in Lexington, posted a video to our We See You Watching Lexington Facebook page, just giving an overview of some things that are going on with our efforts to bring about oversight and transparency to surveillance programs here in the city. And we got a couple of commenters on the Facebook thread giving us this whole, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear mentality. And, they just don't care about surveillance. In fact, they're glad for this surveillance because it's going to protect them. It's about safety. It's going to get the bad guys. And here's the thing. When they say that they don't really care about surveillance, when they say that they don't really care about this kind of invasion of privacy, they don't really mean it. What they really mean is they don't believe that the government is ever going to look at them. They don't believe anybody is really watching them. They're just watching the quote-unquote bad guys. And what's ironic to me is most of the people that have this mentality tend to be on the right side of the political spectrum. They tend to be political conservatives. So this is part of the whole, law and order mentality. So we're going to get the bad guys, and these cameras, that's going to help us, help our fine men in blue catch the bad guys. And I'm not a bad guy, so therefore I don't have to worry about surveillance. And I guess I kind of understand this coming from the political right, from a conservative perspective, because by and large, these people have never been targeted by government surveillance. They're not the ones that the government has looked at. They're not the ones who have had their privacy violated. It's the people that have been in the anti-war movement. It's the people who live in minority communities. It's people who have religious views that might be outside of the mainstream. And you see, they don't care if those people are surveilled because those are the bad guys, and we got to get the bad guys. What they don't seem to understand is once the surveillance state is in place, they have absolutely no control over whom it's pointed at. And at some point, I guarantee you, the government is going to start looking at them. It's funny because a lot of these people are your gun rights people, and they're the government's never going to take my guns, and they're all worried about, gun confiscation and gun control. Who do they think is going to come take their guns? It's the police. And how are the police going to find them? With surveillance. So, if the political climate ever changes and we do end up with something like gun confiscation, or we get a far left administration that finds the right wing, to be dangerous, all of a sudden the eye of the spy is going to be focused on them, and they're not going to like it. But the problem is it's too late at that point because they've already let it go. They've been running around for the last 20 years going, oh, I got nothing to hide. I got nothing to fear. And then all of a sudden they have something to hide. They're not going to like it, not one little bit. A couple of years ago, Glenn Greenwald did a really good TED Talk on surveillance, and he pointed out that the people that say they have nothing to hide actually reveals a more sorry and troubling mindset. He said the people who are actually saying that are engaged in a very extreme act of self-deprecation. What they're really saying is, I have agreed to make myself such a harmless and unthreatening and uninteresting person that I actually don't fear having the government know what it is I am doing. And, like I said, maybe they are that harmless and that boring, but at some point, the political winds are going to change. At some point, these people are going to come under the microscope. These conservatives, these right-wingers, I don't think that they should feel safe with the government watching them, but for whatever weird reason, they do. Greenwald points out another disturbing fact about living in a surveillance state. It has a chilling effect on the way we behave. A society that is afraid to act becomes a society ripe for tyranny. Glenn said, when we're in a state where we can be monitored, where we can be watched, our behavior changes dramatically. The range of behavioral options that we consider when we think we're being watched severely reduce. When somebody knows that they might be watched, the behavior they engage in is vastly more conformist and compliant. A society in which people can be monitored at all times is a society that breeds conformity, obedience, and submission, which is why every tyrant, from the most overt to the most subtle, craves that system. Again, I can't help but point out the irony here. We have people who revere the American patriots for standing up against British tyranny, supporting a surveillance state. Can you imagine the American colonists saying, oh, we don't mind if the British spy on us. We have nothing to hide, so we have nothing to fear. That's ridiculous. I mean, part of the reason we ended up having the American Revolution was that the British soldiers and the British agents were violating Americans' privacy. Privacy mattered to them, but yet we have these people that call themselves conservatives running around supporting a surveillance state that creates conformity and obedience. It's absurd, but again, it's because they think, well, we're the good guys and the government's on the side of the good. When has the government ever been on the side of the good guys? And like Greenwald says, the government's definition of bad people is probably a lot different than yours. When you say somebody who's doing bad things, you probably mean things like plotting a terrorist attack or engaging in violent criminality. A much narrower conception of what people who wield power mean when they say doing bad things. For them, doing bad things typically means doing something that poses meaningful challenges to the exercise of their own power. Greenwald builds a really compelling case against those people who will submit to ubiquitous surveillance. He argues that they greatly minimize the risks, and he rightly paints constant government spying as a threat to our freedom. When we allow a society to exist in which we're subject to constant monitoring, he said, we allow the essence of human freedom to be severely crippled. That's not conservative. That's not limited government. So all of you conservative limited government law and order people out there need to stop and rethink what you're saying. Maybe you don't have anything to fear right now, but can you guarantee that you will never have anything to hide? Can you guarantee that you will always be obedient and submissive to the government no matter what it does? If you're telling me that, then you are absolutely insane. Look, I don't trust anybody with power. Nobody. If somebody has power, then there should be power on the other side of the equation to check that power. That's all we're working towards at We See You Watching Lexington. We want oversight and we want transparency with surveillance. We want to be able to watch the watchers. We do not want them spying on us in secret. And like I said, I don't really believe you when you tell me your privacy doesn't matter. Because if it didn't matter, you wouldn't set your Facebook settings on private. But if you're really going to insist that you don't care, that surveillance doesn't matter, I have a challenge for you. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go download your browsing history for 1 year. Download all of it. Don't delete the porn sites. Don't delete the dirty pictures. Download every single bit of it. Every site that you visited, everything that you've done on the web. Send it to me, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to post it on We See You Watching Lexington with your name and a photograph. Okay? So if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, right? Send it to me. michael.maharrey@10thamendmentcenter.com. Put your money where your mouth is. If privacy doesn't matter, send me your browsing history. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Send it, I'll post it, it'll be fun. Well, that's it for this episode of Thoughts from Maharrey Head. We're another 10 minutes closer to freedom. I really appreciate you listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, do me a favor and spread the word. And feel free to send me any thoughts or ideas and your web history to michael.maharrey@10thamendmentcenter.com. If you haven't done it already, please subscribe to the podcast for free over at iTunes. I appreciate you listening, and I'll talk to you again next time.